In the beginning, they summoned the spirit of light to raise the sun, while the great sorcerer Fried called forth the night with the spirit of darkness. And while Melaner gave her energy to all living things, Fried offered peace, granting shade and cool from the blazing light. Just like that, in their hands the entire empire of Javera was born, forged from light and darkness. This exclusive power to summon mighty spirits belonged to only two families: the Imperial Melaner family and the line of Archduke Fried. They were considered irreplaceable and totally unique. Centuries later, in a lavish sun-drenched palace, a completely different story is unfolding. A girl, lost in a book, mentally scoffs at those words, irreplaceable and unique. For Princess Dorothea Melaner, this whole epic history was just a load of laughable bullshit. But her thoughts are cut short by an annoying kid shouting, someone calling her Dorothy over and over, and it's seriously starting to piss her off. She coldly tells Ray to keep it down and just walks off, leaving the kid completely baffled. Ray immediately stammers out an apology, promising to be quiet, but it looks like she couldn't give a damn. She looks at this clingy little shit and thinks he doesn't have a single shred of dignity, just a pathetic sight. And this same pathetic little boy, beaming like an idiot, asks her to wait for him, because this boy is the crown prince of the empire and incidentally her older brother, which makes her feel even more like shit. But to be precise, her gaze turns to ice because things are way more complicated. In her past life, this very same legitimate crown prince died by her hand. Plot twist. Yeah, you heard that right. This life is her second chance, a final opportunity given to her, the former tyrant. And she has no intention of repeating the bloody mistakes of the past, because now that's her only goal. This time she has a simple plan: just be good, just don't end up dead. Because the main takeaway from her first life was brutally simple: you reap what you fucking sow. And what she sowed was pure, concentrated evil. She murdered the crown prince, usurped the throne, and became the empress. She ruthlessly eliminated anyone who dared to stand in her way, drenching the empire in blood, all while generously sharing power and wealth with her personal yes-men. Except that life of luxury and absolute power ended for her in a complete and total disaster. The man she loved grew to hate her and chose death, while her own lackeys choked her with the very power she gave them. Classic. The entire nation, pointing their fingers, branded her a tyrant, and you know what? They were damn right. Their righteous fury burned her palace to the ground and led her to the scaffold, where she decided she'd had enough of this fucking life's lessons. And then, opening her eyes, she hears voices cooing about how cute she is and can't figure out what the hell is happening. Someone says her name, Princess Dorothea, and it hits her that she's somehow a baby again. So she, the former tyrant Dorothea Melaner, was given a new life and a single chance to fix everything. She sits with her books, thinking that her execution was the lesson meant to put her on the righteous path. This is her only chance to completely change her life, a life stained by evil and endless regrets. Because it was murdering Ray and seizing the throne that marked the birth of the tyrant Dorothea, and the beginning of all her suffering. Which means this time she must not kill him, must not hate him, and has to tolerate him no matter what it costs her. And right on cue, her resolve is put to the test. Ray barrels into her with a hug, gushing about how brilliant and precious she is. A simple thought instantly flashes through her mind. Maybe I should just kill him? I mean, it's a solid plan. Ray keeps squeezing and kissing her, baby talking about what a cutie she is, while she demands he get off her. She barely holds back a grimace of disgust because she has never, and I mean never, liked Ray. He's completely oblivious and suggests they study history together, playing dumb like he's not as smart as she is. She thinks his pretty little head is probably empty, but he has everything simply because he's the crown prince. Ray, acting like nothing's wrong, asks her to play, and she, barely hiding her irritation, tells him to go entertain himself. He starts whining that he wants to play with her, but the governess tells him not to disturb the princess during her studies. The woman is impressed that Dorothea is already studying history and, as an example, brings up the spirit stone that was lost during the Teresa era. But Dorothea cuts her off immediately, stating that the stone disappeared in the Korosis era, which, by the way, is a 100-year difference. The governess and Ray are totally floored by this knowledge. The kid yells that she's a genius, while the woman is just stunned silent. The teacher is also in shock and asks if she's memorized the entire family tree, and Dorothea realizes she just blew her cover. Damn it, she should have pretended to be dumber. She sees how freaked out the governess is and decides to dial it back, telling her not to worry about it. And most importantly, she begs her not to report her talents to His Majesty under any circumstances. His Majesty, Emperor Karnan Milana, also known in very small circles as her actual father. Except for her, the word father had always been something alien and distant, like a foreign word whose true meaning she could never quite grasp. And even though they were connected by blood, in her case, that meant absolutely nothing, because she didn't inherit the main qualification of the Milano line, their special power to summon spirits. Her mother died giving birth to her, and Karnan always kept his distance from the child who took his wife away. No matter how hard Dorothea tried to get his attention, she'd purposely fall in front of him, show off how smart she was, do anything just to make him look at her. She bent over backwards to be better than Ray, to surpass him in at least one thing. But her father never, not once, even gave her a second glance. What an asshole. But with Ray it was completely different. He didn't have to do a thing to get gifts and have dinner with their father. That little brat was always smiling. And she just couldn't understand why Karnan was so obsessed with this carefree idiot, and why he could never spare even a shred of that attention for her, his own daughter. Was it all because she wasn't the chosen one? The thought just tore her apart with hatred for Ray. This blind hatred would explode out of her, making her smash everything in sight to the horrified screams of the servants. She used every opportunity to bully Ray, and only felt satisfied when she was taking something that belonged to him. For that, her father would furiously order her to be locked in her room for a whole fucking month. And the harsher she was with her brother, the worse her already shitty relationship with Karnan became. She had always craved love so desperately, but her own life was too disgusting to ever deserve it. All her attempts were as pointless as trying to reach out and touch the beautiful cold moon. Her love was always unrequited, and in this fertile soil of anger and resentment, the seed of true evil quickly sprouted, a seed that gave birth to an envious monster that stomps on other people's souls and greedily devours everything in its path. The very same evil that was given a name, Dorothea Milano the Tyrant. Nice to meet ya. But now, sitting in the silence, she knows there's zero point in these memories, and even blaming her sins on others is meaningless. In the end, she comes to a simple conclusion: it must be her fault for not being good enough to be loved. She convinces herself that it's okay, that she's not mad at Karnan anymore, and that a life in the shadows won't be so bad. Maybe this is the best way to live this life as a good person, to just stay out of the spotlight. The governess, seeing her quiet resignation, thoughtfully thumbs through some books, wondering what else to offer her. Though deep down, she's sure the emperor would be thrilled by the princess's intellect, and she feels it's a shame how stupidly things have turned out. And to try and snap her out of it, the woman suggests the princess take a walk in a special place. She points enthusiastically to a beautiful garden, insisting that it will definitely lift her spirits. Except Dorothea is in shock, because this place is Alice's house, her late mother's personal garden. Of all the places for a walk, Karnan built this garden for his wife when she was homesick, and Dorothea used to come here a lot, but she has absolutely no idea why, out of all possible places, the governess dragged her here. And then she hears the governess say, "Your Majesty," and her childish heart sinks into her stomach. Standing right in front of her is him, the emperor, her father, who clearly wasn't expecting to see anyone else here. He's staring right at her, and she's terrified, thinking she just did something as brainless and stupid as Ray would. The emperor coldly asks who she is, and she's frantically trying to figure out what the hell she's supposed to say to him, and how she even dared to enter the sacred garden of his late wife. But then it hits her, of course. How could she forget that to him? She really is a nobody. The governess rushes to the rescue, introducing her as Princess Dorothea, and he repeats the name in surprise, as if hearing it for the first time. Her father mutters under his breath that this is just ridiculous, and she can't believe what she's hearing. He scoffs, thinking she doesn't even know how to greet the emperor, and asks if she was never taught. Father of the year, right here. Dorothea mentally snarks back that there was no one to teach her, since she basically has no parents, shooting daggers at the governess for all her ass-kissing. The emperor, however, looking at her defiant glare, only thinks that she looks like a small, arrogant brat. The governess keeps on sucking up, insisting the princess is just in shock from their first meeting and knows all the proper etiquette. And Dorothea, getting a grip, performs a perfect curtsy, finally addressing His Majesty. With cold curiosity, he asks how old she is, and she calmly replies that she turned 8 this year. Then he asks what's so special about her praised intellect, but she tries to dodge the question, saying the governess is exaggerating everything. But there's no stopping this woman now. She proudly declares that Her Highness has learned the entire fucking royal family tree. The emperor looks at her with clear disbelief, and asks if that's really true, if she's actually memorized it all. And without waiting for an answer, he commands her with an icy face to start reciting it immediately. But she doesn't rush to obey. Instead, she boldly asks if the emperor himself is sure of his own knowledge, or if maybe he's the one who doesn't know it. Damn, what a power move. The emperor is so stunned by her nerve that he gets chills, asking in disbelief if she, a little brat, is testing him. She looks him dead in the eye and asks, Since it seems he's the one testing her knowledge, what's in it for her to recite the whole lineage? The emperor is exploding with rage, mentally roaring. Is she questioning my command? While the governess looks like she's about to shit her pants in fear. But Dorothea doesn't back down, declaring she simply doesn't want to waste his precious time. Seeing as he was so busy he couldn't find a single minute to see her since the day she was born. He tries to trap her with her words, saying she's only willing to obey for a reward, but she replies with a sweet smile that she's just trying not to waste their mutual time. And then he suddenly changes his tone, admitting that maybe the governess was right after all. He looks straight at her and offers to grant her a wish. Tell me what you want, Dorothea Melaner. And she is fucking floored by the offer. Her head is spinning. Tell him what she wants? But why? She can't remember Karnan ever asking her for anything like that in her entire life. She thinks that if she were her old self from her past life, she'd be jumping for joy, but unfortunately for him, she now wants absolutely nothing from this man. But she can't just refuse to answer the emperor either. What a dilemma. And then she finds a way out. Asking for the best wine in the empire to be made in her honor. She didn't just blurt that out randomly. She asked for something that will definitely be useful to her in the future. The emperor immediately blows up and lays into the governess, demanding to know what she's been teaching the child and how a girl her age could even be talking about wine. The woman stammers in a panic that she never spoke about alcohol, but Dorothea cuts her off, stating that the governess didn't teach her that. She explains that she read about it in a book called Portrait of Babylois. There was a scene where the heroine Babylois enjoys a glass of wine with her lover, marveling at its exquisite taste. And ever since then, she's been incredibly curious and has always wanted to try a good wine. What a brilliant excuse. And the emperor is completely mind-blown. He's thinking, how could a kid this small possibly read a book that complex? He looks at her with a new kind of interest and finally agrees, promising that the best wine will be made in her honor, just as she wished. But he immediately adds a condition. If she makes a single mistake in a single name, he will punish the governess for lying. And now, be so kind as to begin your story. And looking at that cold cruelty, she suddenly realizes that her own tyrannical tendencies were likely inherited directly from her old man. She calmly accepts the challenge and says fine. She'll start with the direct line of the founding Melaner family. Because if she's decided to be good in this life, the least she can do is save her governess from an undeserved punishment. And even though the governess had hoped the emperor would show some interest after that incident in the garden, Karnan never once came to visit her. The governess tries to comfort her, saying stuff like, poor princess, he's your father and he's just very busy. But Dorothea mentally cuts her off. Karnan just isn't built for fatherhood. The woman always gets upset when this happens, but Dorothea herself is actually grateful for it. Because meetings with Karnan just wreck her mood, and she has to avoid anything that interferes with her firm decision to be good. If she were her old self, she would have already thrown a tantrum trying to prove she was better than Ray, and Karnan would have already punished her for it at least 6 times. She thinks about what an idiot she was, cherishing pointless hopes and swallowing her disappointment all alone. And it's only now just dawned on her that being good is, essentially, about doing fucking nothing at all. What a revelation. Because as soon as she tries to do something, she'll run into someone else's hatred, which will trigger her own rage. And right on cue, her philosophical thoughts are interrupted by Ray, who comes bursting into her personal space with a cheerful shout. The governess is surprised to see the crown prince here, while the mere sight of him is already making Dorothea want to puke. He's looking for Dorothy, and she begs the governess to say she's not here. The woman immediately starts lying awkwardly like, oh, I wonder where she could be. And he declares with a hurt voice that he just wanted to show her how to control the spirit of light. She's mentally seething. Why the hell would she want to see that? Is he trying to mock her? What a jackass. They say controlling the spirit of light is a unique blessing for the Melaner family. Except there's just one tiny problem. All of that is ancient history. The Melaner power, which supposedly raised the sun, has gotten so ridiculously weak that now it's barely enough to light a small fire. And over time, descendants started being born who couldn't control spirits at all. The name of that defective princess is Dorothea Melaner, and she was completely cut out of the sacred tradition. What a disgrace, not an heir. This gave people yet another reason not to like her, and her father, Karnan, was one of them. And in her defiance against the gods, she burned with even more jealousy towards Ray. She convinced herself, who needs that stupid spirit of light anyway? It's just a pathetic sliver of power, propped up by an old fairy tale, a worthless little firefly. So she used her sword to take the power from the spirit and from the throne, declared the end of the age of mythology and the beginning of the age of humanity, clutching a blood-soaked blade in her hand. And just a few years later, she was executed for tyranny. That's how that turned out. Maybe the spirit really does determine the qualities of an emperor, and her pathetic downfall was the great legend's punishment for her arrogance. Ray is still grilling the governess about where Dorothy went, and she's pretending she has no clue, while the runaway herself is hiding in the bushes, waiting for him to finally fuck off. He says, disappointed, that he just wanted to introduce her to his friend who came to visit. But she couldn't care less. Ray's friend will only destroy her peace, so she decides to dump her brother drama on the governess and go take a nap. She tiptoes through the garden, figuring if she turns here, she can slip into her room without being seen. But the second she turns the corner, she runs face first into some unfamiliar kid. The shock makes her lose her balance, and she falls flat on her ass, scaring the absolute crap out of the boy. She's sitting on the grass, hissing with pain and annoyance. Of all the stupid ways to get caught. The guy immediately apologizes and asks with concern if she's hurt. And in that moment, a wave of memories of the man she loved more than anyone in her past life washes over her. His last words flash in her mind that she must remember. It was her greed that killed him. And who, at the same time, hated her more than anyone on the planet. Some fucking love story, right? She thinks, how could she have possibly forgotten him? The kid, a spitting image of him, asks worriedly if she can get up. But she just stares at him in total shock, because since the day she returned, she hadn't forgotten about him for a single fucking day. The boy blames himself for not noticing her, frets that her dress is ruined, and then offers her his handkerchief. She wipes her tears and he keeps worrying about her ankles, asking if she'll be able to walk. But she doesn't give a damn about her injuries anymore. She looks at him and, unable to hold it back, whispers, "I missed you, Thean." Thean is in shock. He didn't mishear that, did he? This girl, who he's seeing for the first time in his life, knows his name. He can't wrap his head around how that's even possible and tries to collect his thoughts. But instead of figuring it out, he just takes her hand and tries to calm her down, telling her not to cry or her eyes will hurt. Her heart is hammering like crazy, because the one person who hated her so intensely is now standing right in front of her, alive and brighter than ever. She bursts into tears, finally realizing that none of this is a dream. And just seeing him alive and well already feels like enough of an achievement in this new life. As if she's already done everything right. He gently pats her on the head with a soft smile, and she thinks that maybe, just maybe, he's the reason she came back to this life. But this touching moment is shattered by an furious scream. It's Ray, and he's finally found her. He runs to his sister and frantically asks if she's okay, if she's hurt. She tries to calm him down, muttering that she's fine and nothing serious happened. But Ray isn't listening and launches himself at Thean with a yell. "Alright, here we go, it's fight night." He grabs the kid by the collar and screams in his face, asking if he was the one who dared to upset his Dorothy. And Thean, without a second thought, just admits that yeah, he probably was. That's when Ray completely loses his shit. He calls Thean a villain and yells that he'd hoped for a friendship, and that his sister didn't even cry this hard as a baby. He's shaking Thean, who's trying to explain something, while Dorothea in the background is trying to stop this whole circus. She finally shoves them apart and lies that she's not crying because of Thean, but because something just got in her eye. Yeah, right. Ray immediately falls for this bullshit and starts fussing, peering into her eyes and asking if the speck came out. She assures him everything's fine, thinking to herself that she never would have believed she'd be grateful for Ray's stupidity. He lets out a sigh of relief and immediately switches his focus to her knee. But she waves him off, saying it's just a scratch. Thean watches them in silence and realizes that this princess just covered for him, taking all the blame on herself. Dorothea wipes her tears and tries to figure out what the hell just happened. There's no way they could have met before, so what was with that look on his face? Meanwhile, it finally dawns on Ray what he's done, and he stammers out an apology to Thean for jumping to conclusions. But Thean forgives him with a smile, saying His Highness has nothing to apologize for, since he's the one who scared her. What a saint. And Ray, seizing the moment, finally introduces his new friend to Dorothy. Thean bows again and apologizes, and she still can't believe that he was the friend they wanted her to meet. He takes her hand for a kiss and introduces himself. "My name is Thean Fried." Hearing his last name, she remembers that the Fried family is the other great family of the empire. She looks at him and realizes this is their new beginning, an unwritten story where she can give up her cruel demands for love, and let go of the tragedies of the past. She hopes that if she can love him for real this time, maybe he'll finally notice her in this life. But her thoughts are cut off by someone's voice calling for Thean. The voice sounds terrifyingly familiar, and she whips her head around and sees a cute pink-haired girl standing before her, Julia Delavan. In her past life, Thean, whom she had forced into marrying her, loved Julia, his childhood friend, with his very last breath. Their relationship was special, they fit together like two halves of a whole, and there was simply no room for her in that picture, just like always in her life. She had futilely craved Karnan's love, and then just as futilely tried to win Theon's love. Her entire life was one long, continuous chase for a love that she could never seem to earn. Even after their wedding, Theon kept pursuing Julia, bombarding her with letters. What a bastard! She remembered how Theon and Julia secretly exchanged dozens of letters, a memory that was permanently burned into her mind. And she still remembers his face, shining with a hope, an expression he never fucking showed to her. Back then, she had desperately prayed for Julia to just leave Theon alone, to disappear from his life forever. In the end, she started praying for Julia's death, wishing for it with her whole heart, blackened by envy, and when one of her loyal dogs fabricated a believable accusation to send Julia to her execution, well, the plan worked perfectly. She was on cloud 9, absolutely ecstatic that her main rival was finally dead. She naively believed that Theon would finally belong only to her, but he chose death over her embrace. Talk about a kick in the teeth. And it hit her that, in the end, it was her own greed and selfish love that caused his death. And can you even call this unbearable, heart-shattering agony love at all? And while she was drowning in these memories, Ray was already thrilled to see Julia. While Theon was trying to calm him down for not waiting like he was asked, Ray enthusiastically introduces her to Julia Delavan, who came with Theon, and she gives a sweet greeting to Her Highness. And Dorothea looks at them and thinks bitterly that these two are inseparable even in this fucking life. She has no idea what her own face looks like right now, because she's being torn apart by a storm of conflicting emotions. So she makes up an excuse about sudden business, spins around and bolts, while Ray asks in surprise if she doesn't want to join them. He calls out her name, desperately trying to stop her, but she couldn't give a damn about his attempts anymore. While Theon and Julia just stupidly stare after her, with no idea what the fuck that was. She tears off thinking that she should have guessed. She should have known it would be exactly like this because standing before her eyes is the smiling crown prince, whom she murdered in cold blood with her own hands, her unrequited love, who chose death just to avoid being with her. Yeah, no comment needed there. And the beloved of her love, whom she herself sent to the scaffold on a trumped-up charge. She realizes with horror that in this picture-perfect world, there simply is no, and never will be, a place for her. The governess asks with concern if Her Highness is sure she doesn't want to go play with the others. But Dorothea just waves her off, saying she's just tired, and the governess promises to wake her for dinner. The woman wishes her a good rest and quietly leaves, leaving the princess alone with her thoughts. But even in the silence, the pain doesn't let go, and she just clutches the bedsheets tighter, trying to fall asleep. Time passes, and a new day dawns, flooding the imperial palace with bright sunlight. Dorothea, as if nothing happened, is sitting with her books again, trying to distract herself from her heavy thoughts. Her peace is shattered by Ray, who can't stand still, and she asks him to at least try to act calm. He admits that he's incredibly nervous because today he's being officially proclaimed the crown prince. What a momentous occasion. She agrees that it's a very important position, which only makes him more nervous, and he asks if he even looks like a prince. He looks at her with puppy dog eyes, waiting for support, but gets a bucket of ice-cold water instead. She coldly states that he looks like a fool as always, and he urgently needs to do something about his face. He immediately starts squishing his own cheeks, and she can't believe this naive idiot will one day rule the empire. But then Ray suddenly says that she should be the next ruler, and the words make her physically flinch. He's sure she would have gone through the ceremony with dignity, since she's smarter and far more capable than he is. You would have made a wonderful empress, he says, not having a clue what a painful subject he just brought up. She mentally objects that she can't because she's missing the most important thing, she can't control the spirit of light. But he just waves his hand like, that's nothing, you'll learn soon enough, because such a gifted person simply has to have the power. And she thinks to herself that his naivety is the most toxic, most dangerous poison in the world. God, what a moron. He just doesn't know anything, that's all, but she's sure he'll figure it all out soon enough. She thinks that he doesn't understand the weight of the words he throws around so carelessly, and he cheerfully calls her name again. Ray asks her to say a few words of encouragement, but she just coldly asks, and why would I do that? He starts whining, insisting that her support will definitely help him, and begs her again and again. She snaps angrily for him to just go and embarrass himself, and he, on the verge of tears, calls her an ice block and asks for at least a hug. But she just ignores his whining and walks away, while he runs after her, still begging. His tantrum is cut short by a servant who announces that it's time for His Highness to go. So much drama over nothing. And the investiture ceremony is a big deal where the emperor officially presents his heir to the people, one of the most important affairs of the empire. And so, sitting in the hall and staring at the altar, she starts to notice some strange things. In her past life, she didn't pay attention, but now the ceremony seems way too low-key. Especially since Karnan always loved a lavish spectacle. Then again, maybe she was the one who was too wasteful in her past life, too used to excessive luxury. Footsteps echo in the silence, and she clearly remembers how Emperor Karnan appears before everyone. A herald solemnly announces the arrival of His Majesty, and all eyes snap to him. He recites the ritual words about how the heir must illuminate the empire with the light of the Milaner line. But that was in her past life. Now looking closer at the scepter in his hands, she notices something important. There's definitely supposed to be a spirit stone on it, but for some reason it's not there now. She tries to remember if the stone was ever found, and she seems to recall that news of its discovery broke right before her execution. What difference does it make now? All these relics and the light of the Milaners have nothing to do with her anymore. The emperor finishes his speech, announcing that the investiture ceremony will take place on this very day. Rei, visibly nervous, takes the first step towards his father and his new destiny. And she watches him with bated breath, hoping he doesn't do something stupid right now. Please God, not this. But instead of walking forward, he turns around and flashes her the happiest smile in the world. In a panic, she gestures for him to turn back around and keep walking. What an idiot. But he just keeps nodding happily, and she's practically begging him to stop this circus. She realizes he really is a fool, so overwhelmed with emotion that the spirits of light are flying around her, not him. Meanwhile, Rei kneels before his father, and someone in the crowd whispers that they still can't believe he's the heir. Karnan places the crown on his head. As the haters keep hissing that they certainly wouldn't have made such a mistake, Dorothea snaps out of it. She has no right to think that way, but deep down she sincerely hopes that the next ruler will go down in history as a good and wise king, one this empire deserves. After the ceremony, Karnan congratulates the crown prince and remarks on the beautiful spirits surrounding him. Those words are like a knife to her heart, because for her, the name Milaner isn't a blessing, it's a goddamn curse. Immediately, court ladies flock to her and start showering her with compliments, saying she looks more and more like her late mother, Empress Alice, and she thinks that it's exactly these kinds of situations that make her family name feel like a real curse. Karnan, overhearing this, just throws a dismissive "what nonsense" in their direction, and the ladies scatter like leaves in the wind. They immediately start stammering apologies for their bold words. They just pissed off the emperor himself. She has to silently endure being completely ignored, since all the attention is focused exclusively on Karnan and Rei. She's standing off to the side like a piece of furniture, desperate to escape but unable to. Her Milaner status won't allow it. If she were her old self, she'd already be the center of attention, listing every single flaw and mistake of the new crown prince. Her dark thoughts are interrupted by Rei, who suddenly and mysteriously beckons her over to him. But that Dorothea was left in the past. This one just silently goes when he calls. She doesn't understand what he's so happy about, and just wants this evening to be over with already. She thinks Rei doesn't get it. She doesn't belong next to him, and him calling her over isn't going to change a thing. Suddenly, someone from behind remarks that the party isn't all that fun, and she jumps in surprise. It's Theon. She's shocked. Why is he here and not with Julia? He holds out a glass to her, saying she hasn't had a drink all evening. It hits her that he must have been watching her this whole time, and the thought sends shivers down her spine. Flustered, she somehow manages to choke out a thank you and takes the drink from his hand. To her, this glass of pomegranate juice from Theon is an absolute treasure, and she decides she's going to savor every single sip. Theon tells her that Prince Rei was praising her highly, saying how smart she is and that she knows all the principles of ruling by heart. She humbly waves it off, saying he's greatly exaggerating and that there's really nothing that special about her. And he replies with a smile that he's looking forward to seeing her at Episteme. Well, that's a plot twist. Episteme is the most prestigious academy in the empire, where the best minds gather and the nobility makes useful connections for the future. And it's not just the local elites who study there, but members of royal families and nobility from all over the world. And unlike Rei, who got into this prestigious academy with no problem at all, she was denied that privilege, because under no circumstances was she allowed to outshine the crown prince. As a protest against this injustice, she once ran away from the palace and threw a rock at the academy. Except the rock went through a window and hit the eldest son of Duke Bronte right in the head. Whoops. Because of that incident, Karnan locked her up in the palace, and that became the final straw in their already shitty relationship. She doesn't want a repeat of that story. She gave up on selfish desires long ago, and so she decides she's not going to Episteme. Thean immediately asks in surprise, why not? Because Her Highness would be the perfect student there, but he cuts himself off, realizing he's probably sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. She can see he's sharp enough to get the gist of the situation and not push it any further. What a smart guy. She realizes that Thean shouldn't have seen her so weak and vulnerable. And that just makes her feel even worse. She immediately decides to change the subject and, forcing a smile, starts awkwardly babbling something about the weather today. But their conversation is cut short by Julia, who informs Thean that His Grace the Duke is looking for him. Of course, speak of the devil. Dorothea looks at her and thinks with anguish that this is Julia Delavan, her eternal rival, who always shows up at the worst possible moment. Thean immediately apologizes for being called away. And she replies with a stone face that of course, she understands, since this girl came specifically for him. He says goodbye until their next meeting, and she's just left standing alone in the middle of the hall, watching him walk away. There's noise and fun all around, but for her, the entire world has frozen, leaving her in a deafening and humiliating silence. She decides she's had enough of this humiliation, and that she should probably just bail and go back to her room. Walking past her father, who's chatting with the Duke about something, she doesn't even grant him a glance. She just doesn't give a damn. But her quiet retreat wasn't meant to be. Someone shoves her hard, and the entire glass of juice ends up all over her. Fuck. She stands there in complete shock, staring at the giant red stain spreading across her dress, unable to believe what's happening. A wave of horror shoots through her, because that wasn't just any juice. It was the precious drink that Thean had given her. The man who bumped into her stammers in a panic. Oh no, Your Highness, realizing what deep shit he just stepped in. The Emperor slowly turns around with an icy expression and coldly asks what the fuck is going on here. And the culprit is too terrified to even speak. He looks directly at Dorothea and orders her to apologize to the Duke, and she is fucking floored by the audacity. The Emperor repeats with pressure for her to hurry up, leaving her not a single chance to object. What an asshole. But then Ray intervenes, trying to yell to his father. Your Majesty, Dorothy didn't do anything. She's the victim here. Ignoring her brother's defense, she obediently bows her head and offers her apology to Duke Bronte. Duke Bronte nervously fiddles with his tie. He knows full well that his status at court is way higher than some princess with no real power. He assures Her Highness that it's not her fault at all, but entirely his own blunder, even though everyone knows perfectly well who the real asshole is here. She convinces herself that apologizing wasn't hard. After all, she didn't expect anything different from Karnan. Maintaining an icy calm, she asks the Duke to rise as if nothing happened. After all, there's no point in feeling sorry for herself or holding a grudge. This kind of treatment is just business as usual for her, nothing new. Karnan looks at her ruined dress with disgust and orders a servant named Robert to get her the hell out of here. She thinks this is actually for the best, because now she has a legitimate reason to finally ditch this party. But just as she turns around, she runs into the stunned gazes of Thean and Julia, who saw everything. Her heart drops into her stomach. He saw it. He saw that pathetic spectacle, a helpless princess being humiliated in front of everyone. She feels sick with humiliation and mentally begs him to look away, to just not look at her in this moment. She just can't stand their pitying looks, and bolting from her spot she runs away. It's funny how one glass of juice can give you hope 1 minute, and the next, it can turn your entire soul inside out, exposing all your weaknesses. Absolutely brilliant. Sitting in her room, she thinks she was ready for that kind of treatment from Karnan. It didn't break her. She even managed to swallow her pride and apologize immediately, just as he commanded. But she just can't stand that look from Thean, the one that still makes her feel sick, because she knows for a fact that he doesn't give a damn about her. And seeing him next to Julia is pure torture, tearing her apart with jealousy, and she knows she has to let that feeling go. She absolutely must let him go, but her thoughts are cut off by a knock on the door. It's Ray, asking if she's all right. He says he came to check on her because he was worried. God, what a clingy little shit. Ray helpfully suggests they talk about it, which just makes her want to vomit, and she's barely holding back the urge to gag. She snaps, screaming for Ray to leave her alone and go back to his party where he belongs. But he has no intention of leaving, declaring that he doesn't want to, because a party without her is boring as hell. Instead, he suggests they have their own little private party, and the offer leaves her completely stunned. What an idiot. She finally loses it and, jumping out of bed, decides to tell this moron exactly what she thinks. She yells that the ceremony isn't something you can just ditch out of boredom, and since he's the crown prince now, he needs to fucking act like it. In a fury, she grabs him by the collar, screaming that she doesn't need his pathetic pity. And with desperation in her voice, She begs him to just please finally leave her alone. Ray tries to stammer something back like, I was just, but she cuts him off, demanding that he just leave if he understands. But then a hand stops her, and a voice she's terrified to hear asks uncertainly, Your Highness? She looks up and sees Theon, who asks with genuine concern in his voice if she's okay. She stares at him in total shock, unable to say a word, because he was the last person she ever expected to see here. His worried gaze cuts straight to her soul, and she just doesn't know how to respond. And then Ray finally explains his brilliant plan. Turns out he brought Theon and Julia with him so they could all ditch the party together. Idiot of the year right here. Completely fucking floored. She shoves Ray away, her brain simply refusing to believe what's happening. The world slips out from under her, and she collapses onto the floor, passing out from all the stress. Theon rushes to her side, frantically asking if she's alright, while Julia and Ray just stand there stunned. And in her fading consciousness only one question is beating: where did she manage to screw up so badly? She thinks, what will he think of her now, so pathetic and unworthy of love, and realizes she just hates herself. Through her tears, she resolves that she must be good. She must be better than everyone else, no matter what it takes. Because this is her path to redemption in this new fucking life. So dramatic. After that incident, she was laid up for several days with a terrible fever, her entire body racked with pain. The governess takes care of her, cooing that her precious princess must get well soon. And she just lies there, staring at the ceiling, thinking with a sigh of only one thing. She has to endure this. She has to withstand it all. Whenever she comes to, she just mutters under her breath that she has to be good, repeating it over and over like a mantra. Many days passed, but Ray never once came to visit her, which, all things considered, was to be expected. She thinks it's only fair. After her outburst, he must hate her now, and maybe that's for the best. But she still catches herself glancing at the door every now and then, before letting out a heavy sigh, because deep down, she still cares. And then one day she spots him hiding behind the door, and coldly asks what the fuck he's doing there. Ray timidly stammers that he brought her a gift, but she immediately cuts him off, saying she doesn't need anything, thanks. But he doesn't give up and, nervously wringing his hands, insists that she'll definitely like this. With a proud look, he shows her his first harvest of tomatoes. Wow, gift of the century. She's completely baffled. Tomatoes? A garden? He explains that he started a secret little garden behind the castle. He's beaming with pride, asking if they aren't beautiful, and promises to bring her pumpkins and eggplants when they're ripe. It dawns on her that the crown prince, who's officially enrolled in episteme, has been spending all his time just growing vegetables in his little garden. She can't take it and asks if he shouldn't be studying his ass off instead of this bullshit, which makes Ray jump and stammer that he does study sometimes. She lets out a heavy sigh. He has no idea that some people are killing themselves just to try and surpass him. Unlike her, he never had to put in any effort, because the entire world was already laid at his feet, and he was just enjoying life and all the time he had, while she was fighting for her survival. He keeps making nervous excuses, insisting that really, he has been studying from time to time, honest. Noticing her silence, his face falls and he asks if she's mad, and then quietly apologizes. He sadly admits that he knows he was bugging her, even though she asked him not to, and that he's very sorry. She looks at his slumped figure, and decides to just screw it. What can you expect from an idiot, anyway? She suddenly calls his name, and he immediately flinches, asking in surprise, yeah? If she's decided to be good, she has to go all the way. She tells Ray that he's not going to become a good emperor acting like this. He scratches the back of his neck, embarrassed, and admits that she's basically right and that he hadn't thought about it. But despite her decision, she feels a part of her soul that just doesn't want to see him on the throne. Maybe that tyrant nature really is in her blood. Ray tries to change the subject and offers her the tomatoes again, insisting they're delicious because they're fresh from the garden. And then he beams like a happy idiot and swears that he'll try his absolute best at episteme to become a brother she'll be proud of. She turns away and coldly throws back that he should just focus on himself and his own business. He hesitates for a moment, but then timidly asks if maybe she'd like to go outside sometimes, since being cooped up all day must be tiring. She thinks about his words and realizes it's true. She's barely left the palace walls in this life. She figures that since she's not going to episteme, there's no point. Besides, she's already seen everything in her past life. But Ray immediately argues back, saying she's never been outside, and there's so much cool stuff in the world, and starts gushing about the market. What a little kid. He insists that she'll definitely find it interesting because with a brain like hers, she'll see the world from a totally different perspective, and once again asks her to go for a walk with him. But she coldly shoots him down like, "No thanks, not interested." His eyes well up with tears and he asks why, and she just throws back, "Because." But he doesn't let up and a little while later, is back to following her around like a lost puppy, whining for her to go outside with him. He's pulling the puppy dog eyes and begging her, and she thought that if she just said no he'd finally piss off. How wrong she was. She tries to ignore him, burying her face in a book, but this clingy little shit just doesn't know the word no. He brings out the heavy artillery. He even prepared a special page in her book with, "Let's go for a walk together," written on it. This is a fucking circus. Her patience finally snaps, and with a pounding headache, she thinks that she just can't take this anymore. She finally gives in and says, "Fine," which makes Ray start beaming with happiness, unable to believe his ears. She's really going to go with him? But she immediately lays down a condition. She'll go alone without him. The governess or the guards can go with her, but not him. Ray agrees with a sour look on his face. The main thing is that she's going somewhere at all. Dorothea turns away, her whole posture screaming how done she is with him. And so when she comes out in a new dress, the governess can't believe her eyes, gasping with delight. Dorothea fidgets and asks if it was really necessary to stuff her into this frilly monstrosity, but the woman is ecstatic. Of course it was absolutely necessary. The governess babbles about how lovely she looks, while the princess thinks to herself that this outfit is not the least bit fucking comfortable. The woman squeezes her hand and confesses that she's always dreamed of seeing her in a walking dress, and this day has finally come, and she immediately drags her outside before the princess can change her mind. And Dorothea already knows she's made a huge mistake. They step out into a lively city square, which is bustling with life and so crowded you can barely move. Dorothea looks around, and some guy next to her grumbles under his breath that it's always this packed here. The governess immediately warns that there are tons of people, and they need to hold on tight so they don't get lost, and Dorothea is pissed that she's being treated like a kid. But in her past life, she remembers she never just walked around like this, simply holding someone's hand. This simple touch makes her feel kind of strange, since she's completely unused to it. The governess leads her to a viewing platform with a view of the entire capital, and for the first time she sees the empire from this height. In her memory, everything is completely different. Cities in flames, people ravaged by hunger, and streets soaked in blood. And now she looks at this peaceful landscape and it hits her, so this is what the empire looks like without her, without the tyrant. Her thoughts are cut short by the governess's excited cry, who drags her to see something interesting. Turns out, a street quartet is performing in the square, and their music fills the entire area. The woman suggests with a smile that they go a little closer and listen for a bit, to enjoy the moment. And Dorothea, to her own surprise, agrees, thinking that maybe this isn't such a bad idea after all. And at the same time from the shadows, Theon is watching them, deciding that there'd be no harm in just looking at this peaceful scene. And then a horrible image pierces her mind. She's tied up with a gag in her mouth, trying to assess the situation she's in at 9 years old. Yeah, her brain just completely broke here. She sees herself tied up on a dirty floor, while some voices discuss when they're going to get rid of this kid. One of the kidnappers decides she might be more useful alive, at least until they get their money. Real businessmen, huh? And she just clenches her fists, thinking that she hasn't held a sword once since returning to this life. She can't figure out how this could have happened to her, and the action suddenly jumps back 4 days. Straight to the moment her walk had just begun, and the governess couldn't stop gushing about what a cutie she was. The woman was enthusiastically picking out hats for her, asking how she liked this one or that one, while Dorothea just stared grimly at her own reflection. In the end, the governess suggests just taking all of them, and the princess tries to calm her down, asking her to wait a minute. But the woman is already rushing ahead, pulling her along, and Dorothea thinks she's already regretted this whole idea 100 times over. They're walking down the busy street again, the governess holding her hand and carrying some books under her arm. Suddenly, she suggests popping into an excellent bookstore in one of the side streets, and this suggestion makes Dorothea's eyes light up. The governess suggests cutting through a quiet alley to avoid pushing through the crowd, and after that they can treat themselves to dessert. She's chirping about how she can't wait to see the joy on the princess's face, and behind them, a dark figure rises up, cutting off their path of retreat. A sinister silhouette looms right over the unsuspecting woman, raising a hand to strike. There's a dull thud, and the governess falls to the ground, and Dorothea's eyes widen in horror. She desperately screams the governess's name, turning at the sound of footsteps, and sees a hand reaching out for her. The next second, a hand clamps over her mouth, and she can only make muffled sounds of helplessness and fear. The sight of the still body on the ground makes her want to throw up, and a disgusting voice suggests they go get dessert together. What a bunch of bastards. She can't believe what a pathetic situation she's in. She used to be the fucking empress. And now, lying on the floor, she thinks she doesn't mind dying, just not at the hands of these worthless scumbags. She overhears their conversation and learns that 4 days have already passed. And it dawns on her that she's been unconscious this whole time. She's sure the governess will do everything possible, but Karnan will most likely just decide she's a bargaining chip and won't pay up. It becomes clear that sitting around and waiting for help from her father is pointless, and she starts to move, which immediately gets the kidnappers' attention. One of them says it looks like she's woken up, and with a blindfold over her eyes, she decides to resort to a plan she usually never uses. She slowly rises to her feet and, walking up to them, politely asks them to take off her blindfold. A huge guy looms over her and gives a gruff hello to the little girl. He laughs, says what a cutie she is, and introduces himself as Tutu, and Dorothea coolly asks who the hell he is. She quickly scans the situation. 2 kidnappers, looking like street thugs, and immediately asks Tutu if he's her new governess. Turning on all her charm, she bats her eyelashes and asks if maybe he's a friend of her daddy's, all while thinking what a humiliation this is for her, the great Dorothea. This oaf immediately takes the bait and, breaking into a huge grin, confirms that yeah, he's a friend of her father's. Absolutely brilliant. She asks if she can call him Uncle Tutu, and while he's melting with delight, she's mentally promising to one day tear him to pieces. It makes her sick to her stomach that these two just see her as a pretty little doll who's definitely an aristocrat. An image from her past life immediately flashes in her mind, where a handsome young man on his knees swore to do anything for her smile. He begged her just to grant him a glance and a smile. That was her level, not all of this. But reality rudely shoves her back into place. Tutu unties her and she, looking around, asks with a naive expression where they are. She keeps her act going and with childish wonder asks about the scar on his face, saying how cool it is. And this idiot immediately starts feeding her some bullshit story about how he fought 17 men all by himself, and she claps her hands, thinking you could write a book with all this crap. While he's lost in his own hype, she quickly scans her surroundings and realizes the situation is not in her favor just yet. She tugs on his shirt and whines pitifully that she's hungry, and the kidnapper immediately starts fussing over her like a mother hen. Tutu tells his partner Danny that the girl wants to eat, but he just barks back, so what? Danny looks at him like he's an idiot and asks if he really thinks they're running a fucking daycare here. She looks at their food and thinks these assholes are already spending the ransom money they don't have, but the hunger in her stomach is just unbearable. Tutu picks her up to sit her next to them, but Danny rudely orders him to just put her on the floor. He screams at his partner to get a grip and stop playing governess, but Tutu mumbles that she's just a kid. Danny orders him to tie her to a post, but Tutu argues that he's her uncle. And Dorothea is already sick of this circus. Danny gets right in her face and informs her in an icy tone that they are not her uncles. They brought her here to kill her. He shoves her with all his strength, screaming that he hates spoiled aristocrats, and she flies straight into the wall. Well, that's a plot twist. Tutu tries to calm him down, but Danny has already grabbed a rope and is snarling that since they're gonna kill her anyway, he might as well start with his partner. Dorothea slowly gets up, thinking that these two are really starting to piss her off, while Danny keeps laying into Tutu for being too soft. Suddenly, with a wild scream, Danny leaps onto the table, and Tutu asks in shock, "What the hell is going on?" Shaking with fear, he points under the table, where 2 glowing eyes are staring at them from the darkness. Some kind of shadow flies out from under the table and Dorothea, who they'd managed to tie up again, tries to figure out what it is. It turns out to be a giant scorpion, which looks at her with a silent "Who me?" and an image of some cursed scorpion flashes in her mind. She's completely confused, because scorpions aren't native to the Lampas archipelago, while her kidnappers continue to shriek in fear. Danny screams at Tutu to kill the creature, and he whines that he's afraid of being stung, and Dorothea is already sick of their panic. She calmly asks her uncles if they'll feed her if she catches this scorpion herself. With a sweet smile, she declares that all she needs is 2 sticks. A total Terminator in a dress. In desperation, Danny agrees and orders Tutu to untie her if she can actually pull off this insane idea. As they untie her, she thinks to herself that these grown men are afraid of a little scorpion, and spots the perfect weapon on a shelf, a pair of game sticks. She deftly snatches the scorpion as if with chopsticks and shows off her catch, and the 2 of them scream in terror for her to kill it. Danny, hiding behind Tutu's back, begs her to throw the creature away and promises her food, while the other guy stammers that he's too hungry to even move his hand. She threateningly pokes the scorpion at them and asks what about tomorrow, and the day after that, and they immediately surrender, promising her food. Clutching her trophy in her hands, she goes down the stairs and realizes why it was so dark. They'd been keeping her in a basement this whole time. After getting outside, she finally understands why her kidnappers were so careless. There's nothing around but an endless desert, and she doesn't know where the nearest village is or who even knows that she's here.